Aesthetics to Emotion, Perspectives from Carnatic Music. We invite Dr. E.S. Krishnamurthy to introduce Shri T.M. Krishna, and we request Mrs. Radhamani Muthukrishnan to hand over a bouquet.
That's for Sangeeta, not for you. That goes home, I see. So to introduce T.M. Krishna to an audience in Madras is like carrying coals to Newcastle, as they say. Just to say that very few people who are the innovators, the pioneers, the pathbreakers, have the courage to push the boundaries. And I think T.M. Krishna is one such person whom we are all very blessed to have in Madras. And I first got back and connect with him when I wrote an article on J. Krishnamurthy. And he was one of the few people who wrote back complimentarily. I had a lot of hate mail. But Krishna was one person who wrote back and said, the neuropsychiatry of the transformation experience interests me. And we've since been in occasional touch. And it's a great pleasure, because he's a maestro of Carnatic music. He has an interest in aesthetics. He has an interest in emotion. He has an interest in the working of the brain. And I think he's a truly multifaceted personality. And without further ado, I'm going to let Krishna talk to us about his perspective on aesthetics, emotions, and Carnatic music. Over to Krishna.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to first thank Mahesh for having invited me here today. He said a lot of things about me, but essentially, I come from the world of art, from the world of experience. And we don't come from the world of science. We come from the world, I'm not splitting the worlds, I'm just using this as an expression. So, a philosophical question that's always been asked by people involved in aesthetics, people involved in art is, why does an artist need to explain what he or she does? Is there a necessity for an artist, whether it's a painter or whether it's a musician, to talk about what they do? I mean, in fact, there have been attempts of trying to do that, and many people have said they failed. Because art, after all, like Professor Chandra so beautifully said, is about emotions. And if the artist and the listener, the viewer, are part of that emotional connect, is there a necessity for me to come up here and tell you, this is what we do, or I'm trying to tell you this is why you feel, completely in terms of what we do. In a certain way, I kind of agree that there's no necessity to really talk about it. But before we get into that position of not talking about it, we must first know what we are not talking about. So if you don't know what we are not talking about, how can we not talk about it? So that's a fabulous escape route for me. So I'm just going to use that. And I am going to try and talk about aesthetics and music, especially Carnatic music. But there's another issue also. The other issue that I feel I grapple with is the whole idea of music itself. What makes something music? What makes something sound? Who does the transference of something that is perceived as sound to music? So the fact is, sound exists, but music is something that we decide is music, and we categorize. Sound is not something that we have created. Sound already exists. So the whole challenge of, if I'm talking about music, first, do I know what music is the first big battle for me. Do I know what music is when I talk about music, or am I constructing it based on what has already been defined as music? So this is I think is a major challenge for any artist to first figure out what music really means. To me, music is a purely human construction. Human beings have constructed the sounds, could be organically, not necessarily as an exercise to put sounds together, but through experience, to title it as music. And any categorization and any titling is always a challenge because we bring language into that. The moment you bring language into that, how is thought and feeling being translated into language? Or is it only a battle between words? The moment language comes in, many times we are actually having a conversation about the language rather than what we have experienced. So I'm just trying to place in front of you the real challenges that actually exist when trying to transfer experience into word form and trying to transfer that into a point of explanation. But I'm still going to try and battle with it and try and get somewhere with the whole idea. I loved one word Professor Trimble used, and I'm going to completely take that from him, and that was gut. I enjoyed that word, and I'm going to come back to that word when I speak about emotions, because I think that was such a vital link to the whole idea of what he said. And I'm going to speak on an experiential side rather than from the brain or from the psychiatric side. Now, music essentially is something that connects us with emotions. Now, this is a very generic statement, that music connects us with emotions. And music does it in a way language does not do. It does it in a way where there is no literal communication, but there is intrinsic communication. Now, the intrinsic communication is only in the form of the experience. It is not in the form of what you say about the experience post the experience. So, I think that's where the gut comes in very, very crucial. And this is what I'm going to try to build on. But as much as you can say music is universal in that aspect of it being about the world of emotions, about what human beings feel or human beings experience, we also don't have one music that everybody listens to. We don't have one music that the whole world says this is music. We have music in different worlds. We have music that is categorized. Many times, sociologically rather than musically, we use words like classical, most of the times not knowing what that really means. We use words like folk, we use words like authentic, we use words like traditional, and all these are constructions that we have actually placed on to the idea of music. So you have sound, you have our idea of how sound becomes music. Now, and then you have the idea of how music becomes different things. But what encapsulates the whole thing is the essential idea of emotions. But I'm going to break this a bit here to come to Carnatic music, and I'm going to do this in order for us to see how we have actually created different ways of dealing with emotions through different manifestations of the idea of music itself. And I'll also place a counter argument to that whole idea that I'm going to place. Now, many people who speak about music say it's very philosophical, it is something that's experiential, something that's esoteric, but nothing that is philosophical or esoteric makes any sense unless it's connected with life, which means it's connected with experience, which also means it's connected with practice, and also the nuts and bolts, which is the technique. So as much as something is philosophical or indescribable, it is also connected to the technique, which is what we see as something that is inconsequential in terms of experience. So we can't disconnect this whole mechanism that we have placed in the way we experience music today. So what is it that defines what music is? Now if you're going to break it down. Social construction, political construction, all these things, our own images, the layering of images that we have from where we grew. People will tell you about how they always heard the morning radio and music in their households and how that influenced the way they have been listening to music today. They will tell you their tastes are determined by that. These are things that everybody who listens to music picks on and carries on. And then you have people, for example, coming from a completely different environment, say from Europe or somewhere, coming all the way to, say, even Chennai, and they want to learn Carnatic music. Now, sometimes it really totally baffles me on what is it that really made them make that connection with this music when culturally they are totally disconnected. So you have that happening, but you do have the fact that we are all conditioned in the way that we receive the music. So as much as it's about emotions, everyone in a way receives it by themselves, in their own order, in the way they think they should receive it, based on what they have carried with themselves. Now, if I go on with this line of thought, then there cannot be a discussion, because everybody will say, this is music, and that's it. So we need to try and disassociate our own personal condition, our own personal trappings, from trying to see if we can investigate music within its own context and see whether it has different roles it is played within the emotional world that it exists in. This is where I'll come to Carnatic music. Now, which I am actually placing in front of you is that in a way, music has intent. I'm trying to tell you here that music, when it is in a certain form, has a certain intent. But when I say music has the intent, I'm saying the practitioners have the intent. The music by itself has no intent. So, can there be music that has different intents? Now, should there be music with different intents is a totally different question, and I'm not going to get into that. But can there be music with different intents? If so, do they satisfy those intents? Now, this is the other question. What about the artist, the musician, or the dancer, or the painter? What governs their way of dealing with the art? So they're all trained. They all learn the mechanics of the art. They all have skill. They all know how to vocalize. They all know how to present music. But does that encapsulate the whole idea of the training, which in itself is a way of placing that person within the context, within their music? So you could have somebody, that's a nice ringtone. So you could have somebody who knows all the mechanics. Yeah, you could have somebody who knows all the mechanics, all the skill. I'll almost call that person some kind of a sterilized mechanics, okay? Then you could have somebody who has along with it something that I will place as emotional assimilation. Now, to me, that is the key to something actually being music, is emotional assimilation. And we always talk about in India this Guru Shishya Parampara. We always talk about sitting in front of the teacher and learning. Honestly, what's the big deal if you're just going to learn all the techniques? But what you actually learn is the emotional cohesiveness that exists in everything that is being sung or played. So what you're learning from your teacher when sitting in front of her or him is not the techniques of how to vocalize or how to put your talam properly or how to sing a raga right. But you're actually learning from, or rather not learning, rather assimilating the music which is hidden in the emotion. How does music itself grasp the emotional world and transfer it to an oral form within the music that you're practicing? Now, what music essentially does, it abstracts the idea of what we experience and gives it to you in an oral form. I liked Professor Nigel's graphs a lot because it said 90% of crime happened with music. And I think there is something there, the fact that it's oral and it's not visual. I think there's something there, the fact that music, when it's experienced, is in the ear. You don't see music. And interestingly, music disappears after it's over. But you still hear the music. I mean, you hear music, but after you hear it, it's gone. But every one of us will know that there's a tune still lingering in our head. And I think there is some magic to that. There is some magic to that. And I think reading, interestingly, is also maybe about hearing. I'm just shooting this out. Because when you read, you don't see the words, you hear the words. Everybody who reads will tell you they actually hear the words. Nobody just sees the words, you actually hear it. So there is something there, I think, to the fact that music is not something just visual, but looking at a painting, but it's something that disappears the moment it has happened. Unless you're going to rewind a recording every 5 seconds and listen to a piece of music, which I think in fact kills the music. When you listen to music, the music happens and it's gone. And it's most beautiful actually when it's gone, not when it's actually happening. So your own imagination has a huge role to play in what you experience in the period of the gone, or the period of the silence. That's why most people say music lies in the silence. And that's something that people have said hundreds of years. Now, I'm going to come straight to the word aesthetics. This is always a problematic word because it's used very often. And aesthetics is usually used in terms of something that is pleasing for me, something that's beautiful for me, something that I think is nice. And as long as it's used in that sense, it is not possible to actually discuss that word. Because everybody has their own sense of aesthetics. Whenever I fly down and land in Chennai airport, I hate those orange houses. There are many orange houses as you land in Chennai. I don't know if you notice, orange and almost green. And to my sense of beautiful, it's not beautiful. But if that is all aesthetics is all about what you think is beautiful and I think is beautiful, then there is no conversation here. We can't talk about that word. But the word itself is interesting. If you look for its etymology and if you look for the word itself, different dictionaries give you different meanings. Of course, the word is Greek, like most of these words. It's considered the philosophy of fine art. They say it's the principles of taste and art, which is very interesting. How can taste and art have any principles? And it comes from the word aesthesia, which actually means anything that produces sensation, anything that has feeling, sensitivity. So aesthesia is the essential part of that word. And all the words that come with that little tics or the tickos are very interesting because they are all words that deal with things that are brought out of empirical study. So all the tics, aesthetics, all the tics that you will hear are referring to empirical. So does it mean data? I think it means more observation. It means something that comes out of study and observation. So it's a combination of sensitivity and something that affects the senses, and a study of that through observation and through understanding an idea. If we were going to take what I would call this detached position of aesthetics, then I think we can move a step closer to try and see if these divisions of music have any sense at all. Because then I am now saying that aesthetics is actually not something completely natural. I'm saying aesthetic is actually, in a way, okay. I'm actually saying aesthetics is in some way a conscious intent. It has a conscious idea of looking at what exists, looking at how it is structured, looking at its form, looking at its intent, content, and seeing whether together there is something that I can look at without putting myself within it and getting stuck with my own entrapments. This is the position that I would like to take on aesthetics, because it's only from this position that I can actually study it. I cannot study it from the position of it being my personal experience of it, because the moment that comes in, it's very difficult for me to make these placements. So I'm going to move here and talk from this position. Here I'm going to straight go into different forms of music and try and look at whether we can look at their form, look at their history, look at their sociological backing, and see we can make out how they are dealing with emotions. They're all dealing with emotions. But is there a specific way in which each are? Now, the word classical is a word that I've of late started disliking a lot because it's purely, completely a sociological construction and not a musical construction. Most musical forms are called classical because they are appreciated by the highest sections of society. Whether it is caste or whether it is monetary or financial is, of course, debatable depending on the context. But classical can be understood in a slightly different fashion, which it's not most of the times. That's why I'm saying I would prefer not to use the word classical, because it entraps me into in Chennai it makes me Brahmin basically. So I'm not going to use that word. But is there something about folk music? We use the word folk music very often. We say that's folk. We hear a tune and we say that's a folk tune. None of us know what we really mean by saying it's a folk tune. Many of us mean it's unsophisticated with our own eyes. Many of us think it's crude. Many of us think it will not fit into our idea of what is beautiful. And there is something simplistic about it. Now, these are the standard impressions that we have. But most things that we think are folk are not folk. Most forms of dance or music that we actually categorize as folk are not folk. They are extremely, if you want to use the word, evolved, and extremely delicate, extremely complex, extremely sophisticated within the social context of their existence. Our detachment from that social context makes us feel a certain way. So what we say as folk is actually, could be classical, you never know. But there is certain forms of music that you could call folk, and I would use that term specifically for community music. Now, for example, the whole idea of people dying, in Madras, in Tamil, there's a word, opari. When people die, there are professional singers who come to that house and they sing. Now, this, I would say, is a kind of folk music because it's community singing that is just passed on from generation to generation. You also have songs for festivals, for harvest. Now, these community kind of music is what you could actually call as folk music. And I'm saying this with absolutely no derogatory undertone in this at all. I'm just making an observation that this could be categorized as folk. Now, we also have popular Western music, which is pretty much born out of a lot of black music that came from the West. Most of popular Western music has its roots from the black community in Northern America. And many of them were actually protest music. Also gospel music, but protest, gospel, and they talked about social issues. And a lot of your whole, whether it's hip hop, whether it's rock and roll, name it, they all have their roots somewhere connecting back to the music that the blacks created in North America. And so what is the objective of rock and roll? I mean, it's a very crazy question to ask. Why is there rock and roll? It's nice, that's a different thing. But if you notice the history of rock and roll or Western popular music, I see two things that have remained kind of constant. One is it has always been a tool for a lot of social changes. Whether it's the 60s or the 70s, you always have issues being raised through that popular form of music. That's because it has a history. Another very important component is the physicality of the music or dancing. Dancing has always been a part. The physical movement has always been a part of Western popular music. So, of course, there are a lot of challenges today. People say that the whole societal move of Western popular music is lost. It's all become about sounds and just about dancing. It's lost its social relevance. But that's something that other people can debate, not me. Then we have something called religious music. Here in South India, we get into trouble once we get into that arena because I'm going to come to Carnatic music next. The objective of religious music, whether it is gospel, whether it's Qawwali, whether it is Sikh, whether it is Hindu, is to evoke in every individual, including the one who is rendering it, a sense of, you want to use the word God, the divine, a sense of heightened emotion towards the words that may be the names of the Lords, or it could just be a deity, it could be anything. But the objective of that music is to get everybody in that place together as a community in a mood of worship, in a mood of surrender, and the mood of surrender towards the divine. There is no argument with that. All these forms of music are only dealing with emotions. But as you can clearly see, each of them are dealing with it in very different ways, in very different contexts. All emotions, but very different contexts. then you come to a word that I have not created, what we call art music. And you have Carnatic music. Now, why should anybody render Carnatic music? And art music, I would even include Western classical music. You could even include jazz in it. Why? Why should I render Carnatic music? Is it because I want to give you a religious experience? Are we all part of a religious community? Are we part of some social reform group? Or is there a political movement involved? Or is there something else? And I think this is the most interesting part for me. Whether it is Carnatic music, or whether it's Hindustani music, or whether it is any other form, I think this is where Professor Trimble's gut comes in very, very importantly, and I'm going to place it here, is the fact that all music abstracts emotion, okay? But art music does something else. In religious music, there is a direct connotation, a direct connection with an object, or a myth, or a deity. And it is in the layering of your relationship with that object, or that deity, or the scripture, where the emotional connection is actually being made. In any religious music, it is made through the passage of that. In political or social music, the connection is made through the words and the lyrics that will express the anguish or the necessity for change that you're doing. Okay? In Carnatic music, what am I expressing? What am I expressing? Am I expressing something here? What am I saying? I think the most interesting part of art music is it derives its existence from itself. It derives its existence from wanting to abstract emotion purely from what it is, which is melody and rhythm. And I will also fix in text here. All three. I didn't say words and I said text, and there's a clear distinction between these two terms, and I'll come to that too. So the idea of art music is to create abstract emotion and take it and place it in front of everybody, but not through a passage of recall of history or recall of myth or through the connection with something else, but just as an experience of sound, experience of melody, its interaction with rhythm, its interaction with the pronounced text. In this triangular relationship, obviously, there is experience, and obviously, there is emotion. But this emotion is different from the emotion when somebody keeps singing Rama, 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 Rama. That is emotion too. So I think this is essentially where art music comes very, very interestingly close to linking directly with just the idea of melody and rhythm and text with emotion, without having you to detour into anything else that is required. Now, the biggest challenge for Carnatic music, of course, is the issue of lyrics. Every word that we utter is uttered with the name and the story of some lord or goddess or something. So, what do we do? I have a very strong view on this. I think that if the music is going to again give you religious music, then there is no necessity for this form to even exist. Because if it's going to be religious music, Nama Sankirtana does a better job of it than Carnatic music. Nama Sankirtana is the South Indian equivalent of Qawwali or anything else. So what I'm going to explore here is in the next 20 minutes, just quickly, on how the three elements that I spoke about, that is melody, rhythm, and text, actually interact with each other and actually abstract the idea of emotion to us in Carnatic music. And we don't need to even refer to anything else there. So this whole beauty of art music is the technique of abstraction. And this technique of abstraction is the fact that the essence of what we emote is directly given in sound in the form of music. Now, the whole idea of gut, I'm just going to mention here. I love that phrase because I always struggle to wonder what it is. It is gut. And I'm not going to say it is sad. I'm not going to use the word sad here. The most profound artistic experiences are from the gut, are always from the gut. They are not sad experiences. There are days as an artist, every artist will tell you that there is this feeling here. And it's not a feeling of feeling sad. It is not a feeling of even feeling happy. I won't use the words happy and sad because I think they're very, very difficult words in this context. But there is a feeling of something that has happened. Okay? And this something is profound. And I use the word profound because I don't know any other word in the context. And it is something that makes you feel fulfilled, makes you feel in a way complete, makes you feel sometimes even, people use the word ethereal, people use the word, just taken away from the context of where you are. But all this is felt like a gut. And I think that is where the magic of art music actually happens, is when the gut appears, without having to rely on anything else for it to appear. Now, in Carnatic music, the audience here pretty much knows the music, so I don't need to say much about it, but I'm just going to talk about 3-4 things very quickly and try and sing a bit. Like I said, you can't divorce technique from abstraction, and you can't divorce abstraction from emotion and emotion from life. Therefore, it's in this conduit that music is happening. We always talk about the word swara in Carnatic music. Swara, in a very easy term, it's considered the note. And we talk about the word gamaka. And it's always discussed like swara exists, and on the swara, we're all placing these different ornamentations or these decorations, and so gamaka is placed on a swara. I'm going to just take a totally different, kind of a different approach to this. Now, swara is a musical entity. Swara is not sound. So we need to differentiate between, if I just say that's not a musical entity. So you can have a frequency, you can have a pitch, which means it is correlated with music. Then you can have tone, which takes pitch to another context. And I'm going to place swara very close to the idea of tone. In very generic terms, tone is always, whether it's used in language or it's used in music, you always have intent, emotion, sensitivity, all these things attached to tone. So, swara is a musical idea. So, if swara exists in music, in my book, it does not exist if there is no idea of gamaka already embedded within the concept of the swara itself. Gamaka is not an external placement on it. I'm just going to sing. Suppose I just sing the ga ma. Now I'm singing a swara. Now I'm not placing on this ma. I'm not placing this on it. If I was going to sing ma in the raga Shankarabharanam, it automatically has its manifestations embedded in it. Ma, 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 ga, ma, ga, ma, pa, ma. So the swara is not some separate entity on which we are placing anything, but it exists only because it is a complex melodic idea. It exists because it's tone, and why I say tone is it exists because it creates emotion. Swara creates emotion. That which does not create emotion cannot be a swara. It can only be a placed sound. It has a technical word, but I won't go into that. So I want to first change this idea that swara exists without gamaka in Carnatic music. Swara exists with gamaka embedded in it. And all its different manifestations is part of the emotional quality that the swara already has, depending on where and which context it is in. Then there's another interesting thing. I kept saying we abstract emotion in melody, but how does it actually happen? Can it happen? Can you actually abstract emotion in melody? I think this is where movement plays such a beautiful role. You will see all musicians shake their hand. And I've always wondered what the correlation between my hand movement and my singing is. And we'll always talk about directions. But in melody, there's no direction actually, right? Where is that direction? There is no visual direction. The music, the melody is not moving in this direction. But we see direction in it. We all see direction in it. Musicians will even tell you that if they close their eyes, they actually see movement. Many musicians will tell you they see movement. And a higher note is seen as going up. A lower note is seen as going down. The fast, a phrase that has a quick run of notes is fast. If it's elongated, it's slow. Now these are all senses that we have. And a lot of our emotions are embedded in these kind of senses too. So the gamaka, for example, I'm just going to take two contrasting ragas just for an idea. I'll take a raga called Sahana. I'm going to sing it as a suras. Every one of these were swaras. They were not swaras on which gamakas were placed. That ga does not exist unless it's sung that way. Okay? But if I was going to sing the same thing as Pamaga Marisa Nisari Amapa Nisari Amapa. So what is this movement actually doing to the way I am receiving it emotionally? So in the idea of the swara, in the idea embedded in the swara is also the idea that based on the kind of movement that is being placed, the pace of the movement that is being placed, the emotive response or the emotive inference, that's a better word, the emotive inference is very different. It's very, very different. The same movement will be inferred differently if I placed a different kind of a movement. Now, the way I sang, Gama pa, Gama pa, everyone will tell you that there is a difference in the way you received it. Forget about whether you understood what I sang or not. Gama pa, Gama pa. Now between the two, emotionally the way it touched you or it hit you is very different, purely because of the kind of movement the ma gave you. So within the gamaka and within the swara is actually embedded the idea of emotion so beautifully. And if you can't divorce it from the two. Another very important aspect that comes in here is the aspect we call laya. You could also call speed, but actually it's a rather more complex idea. Speed gives us very different emotions. Gama pa pa, gama pa pa. The two will give you very different feelings. They could be exactly the same phrase elongated in a slower speed to a higher speed. But the way they emotionally impact us is very different. So the musician, please remember, is instinctively using all this. The musician is not studying this and telling you, here I want this kind of a phrase. No. The musician is instinctively using these techniques that he has or she has imbibed in the music through compositions, through practice, through the guru, in creating a world of emotions through melody. So the swara, the gamaka, then of course the larger concept of raga. The raga is always a difficult word to describe. How do you describe a raga? And I'm not going to go into that today because it's a very huge subject that will take about 4 hours to discuss. But just to put it in a nutshell, raga gives you the context of how these movements are going to happen. Okay? So the raga is like the macro picture, and every swara and every movement is the micro picture. But both don't exist without the other. The micro picture is always reflecting to you what the larger concept is. So within this, you have different speeds, you have different movements, and very importantly, you have different intonations. The intonation of the musician will change the way a phrase is actually received. For example, if I was going to sing another raga, Begada. Okay, I'm going to sing it again. Can you see the difference between the two? Just in terms of how you receive it, forget about the technique, there is a difference. If I was not even going to use the syllable, I'll do something else. The moment I play with that, the derived impact is very different. So every raga within it has different ideas of how the emotionality of the raga is embedded in every phrase, every swara, every connectivity, and every possibility. So every musician is very much touching upon all these things when he is giving you that, or she is giving you that beautiful picture that gives you that gut feeling. And all this is done through speed, through intonation, and I said text. When I said ta-da-na, that is text. That is text. We have to understand that text is not got to do with meaning. Text is any syllable that we are placing. Some musicologists will tell you that even instrumental music, when they have a specific pressure on a certain note, that should also be considered as text. Now that is debatable, and I would love to debate that, but that's a different thing. But text is any syllable that you're placing. Every ta is text. Every na is text. But does it have meaning? That's the important question. Yes, it has meaning, but not linguistic meaning. It has meaning in the way it makes you emotionally respond to that movement. Without the syllabic text there, it gives you a different feeling. With that text placed in those positions, it gives you a different feeling. And again, the musician is instinctively very aware of the differences between the two. But the musician sometimes will tell you that phrase didn't come out right. That's all the musician will probably tell you. The musician will not know why, sometimes. And then if you actually listen to two recordings and wonder why it didn't come out, many times it's the position of that text. If that position of the text is moved, then how the text is received, when I say received, the musician is also a receiver. I must say that right now. I'm not only talking about you as a receiver, I'm talking about myself as a receiver. I receive it very differently. So you have melody, you have speed, all this going. Then what about tala? What about tala? Tala is something that we all talk about, rhythm, structure, tala. So then we have now another relationship. You have melody, you have rhythm, you have tala, you have speeds, which we call laya, and you have text. What is actually happening when all these things are put together, say for example, in a composition? Now, before I get here, I want to say one more point. I had said just in the beginning of my talk that I have a different idea of word in the Carnatic music context beyond its linguistic meaning. I'm going to sing a part of a composition. I've used this many times, but I'm going to sing that again. It's a very famous composition by Muthuswami Dikshithar, Akshalinga Vidho. I'm going to sing that very famous part of his composition to just say something there. Daksha Sikshana Dakshadara Sura Lakshana Vidhi Vilakshana Laksha Vakshana Bahu Vichakshana Sudha Lakshana Guru Kadaksha Vikshana Akshaya. Now, there are two ways of looking at this. He just kept repeating this syllable, ksha. Daksha, sikshana, daksha, darasura, lakshana, vidhi, vilakshana, lakshya. Okay? So one way of saying is, there are a lot of kshas in this. But I'm going to pose a question. Are all the kshas the same? Are they the same? Why? Why are they not the same? Just the ksha. I'm not talking about the word. I'm talking about the sound ksha that appeared. Are they different or are they the same? They are different, but can you tell me why you think it's different?
The positioning of the ksha.
Sorry?
The positioning of the ksha.
You're talking about the melodic positioning of the ksha or some other positioning? What do you mean by positioning?
No, the reference to the context of the lyric, the text, the word. It has a meaning.
No. I want you to forget about that now. I only said ksha. I never spoke about anything else. I said.
What emotion you are expressing and communicating to us?
You heard me very well, I know. Sorry?
What emotion you are expressing, the words to reach us is different one.
Mm.
So it's the emotional viewers what you are communicating with the words.
You think ksha actually gives you emotion? You think so? Can you tell me why you think ksha? I mean, I don't know what ksha means. Okay? Can you tell me why ksha should give you any emotion? It is a meaningless, technically, linguistically, meaningless sound. But you're telling me now that it emotionally touched you, which is very interesting that you're telling me that. I actually enjoy it, of course. But why? Why was it different? Okay, which means my accent, my intonation, the way I present it was different. Fine, accept it. Anything else. But I am not singing it out of thin air. I am singing it out of a certain tradition that has been handed down to me and a certain way of rendition. Because, can I try? Okay. In music, no syllabic sound exists without the music. So in music, ksha is a melodic body. Ksha is not a linguistic body. So ksha is actually a sound that is part of the melody that it is embedded inside. So every ksha is different because its melodic form is very different. I'll sing it again now. Dakshasi kshana dakshadara sura lakshana vidhi lakshana. Every ksha, even the way I intonate it, is not the same. Raksha rakshana bahuvicha kshana sudha bhakshana guru kataksha vikshana akshaya. So does this have meaning or not? That is the question. Does this have meaning or not? It has tremendous meaning. And the meaning is because the syllabic and the melodic do not exist in isolation. The syllabic and the melodic exist together, which is why in Carnatic music, a composer is called a Vakgeyakara. Person who knows, person who composes the text and the geya, singing or the melody. A person who tunes something is never called a composer. This has got nothing to do with linguistic meaning. The emotion, what emotion that is a very complicated subject. I can get there, but I'm not going to get there. But the abstraction of movement that is happening through melodic movement, also through movement of speed, all within the construction of a tala, is now coming with emphasis on certain points, and these points are shifting. Now if you look at tala, that's also a very interesting part. I'm going to put talam for this now. Dakshasi kshana dakshadara sura laksha. Every time it moves to a different position in the rhythmic cycle, it is also affecting you very differently. It is not just the syllable. Every time it moves, it is actually hitting you differently. This is genius. This is actually genius. But the genius is not linguistic genius. It is musical genius. And which is why I say there is a difference in the way sahitya or word should be sensed in Carnatic music vis-a-vis sensed in religious music. In religious music, it is sensed as the word meaning itself that connects you. In art music, it is a construction of melody and syllable. Now, tilanas have no meaning, but everybody will tell you it has emotion. Every tilana has emotion. If every dhridhim has a different effect compared to where is this coming from? It has no meaning. because sound is a melodic form there. Or rather, syllable is a melodic form. Of course, many of these constructions are influenced by linguistics, but in terms of how these syllables are combined, consonant, vowel, etc. But that we won't go into that. So you can see now how emotion is actually being given to you in Carnatic music through word, through tala, through many other positionings. Now, how much time do I have? 2 minutes? Okay, I'll wrap it up fast. Of course, this is a huge subject, and it's very easy for me to take one little element and really expand it and show you hundreds of examples that will work. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to say two things. I'm talking about improvisational music, or what we call Manodharma Sangeeta, and I'm going to come to Alapana. I did show you a few phrases. Suppose I place Alapana and composition together, as two examples of the emotive qualities of music. When a musician sings an Alapana, musician is using primarily two tools. The first tool is the raga. And how does he or she know the raga? Because the person is trained, learned compositions, has learned the emotional embedded qualities of the ragas. And I'm not talking about the linguistic meaning that is derived from it. I'm talking about just the melodic assimilation. And of course, the musician is also using text, ta, da, ri, na, no. So using these two manifestations of the music, every time a musician renders an alapana, there is a different kind of an abstraction happening. Sometimes people ask me, you sang the same phrase. I hear the same phrase. Now this can be asked of Western classical music too. You hear the same symphony 5 times, you don't have the same experience all 5 times. It's the same notation. Okay? So some people have said, you sing some ragas, they've not sung anything new, it's the same phrase. But I like to say one thing, the same phrase doesn't give you the same feeling every time. Similarly, the same set of phrases rendered by 2 people give you 2 different feelings. Why? If they're exactly the same, they should be exactly the same irrespective of who's singing. That is because of the techniques that we spoke about. And these are all very, very naturally employed. These are not some contrived, conscious acts of trickery that people are placing on the audiences. So it's because the placement of the movement, the intonation of the voice, the direction. There's another very interesting thing. We always talk about direction in music. It's something we feel. Like, for example, we say the composition is moving from this to that, but the composition is actually not moving anywhere, is it? But we see direction. So, direction, movement, all these intonations, then timbre. What about timbre? Timbre is so important. The same line of music heard in a sitar sounds very different, or when I say sounds, I mean gives you a different experience, heard from, say, a violin. The same composition. The notes are the same, but there's the difference in the timbre. So the timbre gives you a tonal quality that gives you emotional response. So I've just gone through various aspects to just give you an idea that emotion and abstraction are essentially embedded in Carnatic music. Now, the most important question I'm asking here is, can the literal be ignored? Which is, here, the words. I'm going to say it this way. That the music essentially, if you're going to talk about the intent of the music, is to go beyond the literal. And I think its secret lies in the way melody and rhythm and time and space are all placed within movement, melodic direction, speed, and even a cyclical package that we have given the music. So the music in a way beseeches you, I think, to look at emotionality beyond the word, which also means look at emotions not as your emotion, but emotion as an idea of emotion. So I want to say this here. Art music places the idea of emotion. It does not tell you, you cry because this reminds you of some difficult day you had 3 days ago. But it gives you that gut. I think that's where the gut comes. Usually when it's a memory recall, I don't see that gut experience coming. But when it is something that has just purely moved you and given you a sense of a feeling of something, that it hits you in the gut. And that's got nothing to do with your personal experience. I'm talking about the musician himself too. So I think art music, Carnatic music, takes you beyond your personal sense of love, hate, betrayal, whatever, your ego, yourself, in a way, and places all this as a sense of an objective idea of what life is. And I think in looking at how the technique of it actually helps you do that, it makes me feel more and more convinced that the music is far more than the literal, and it lies in how this objective sense of emotion, which is, I would say, I wouldn't call it the dispassionate sense of emotion, which is yet very passionate, can be felt by everyone. Thank you very much.
Krishna, thank you. I think that was a wonderful exposition of thought about Carnatic music. We have a dialogue scheduled, so I was just going to ask you first, how important, as far as Carnatic music is concerned, is musical training and appreciation? Because if you take folk music, or even if you take the songs of Bharatiyar, it moves you by virtue of both melody and words. With Carnatic music, it often may not be the case. So can you tell us how important training is?
I first like to say that when music is placed onto poetry, what actually moves you is the poetry. Because in placing that music on, most of the times, the objective is straight away to highlight lyrical beauty. And I mean linguistic beauty. Whereas I think in art music or in Carnatic music, I think not training, but awareness is important. I would not use the word training. I would like to use the word awareness and sensitivity. Because I think it is important to understand the music. Now, understanding the music does not mean that you're losing an emotional connectivity with. I think understanding itself means it is emotional. We kind of sanitize understanding as being some cerebral activity that we do over some data that we collect and put numbers onto it. I don't think so. Understanding itself is about the person. And when it's about the person, it's about the emotions. So how can you understand something when you're not discussing emotions? So I think understanding is important, and to really go beyond the word in a Bharatiyar, to go beyond that, I think that understanding is essential for Carnatic. Yeah.
We have the trinity of Carnatic music. How do you think their aesthetics were different, and how different were the emotions that they provoked?
I think they are probably pretty much the basis of whatever I said today, in many ways. This whole idea of having syllable and movement together, syllable and melody together, syllable in different positions, placing it in different speeds. Now, their compositions, they use different speeds. Now, why did they use different speeds? Not just because they found fancy in it, but because there's an emotional layering that is happening in when you move slow, there's an acceleration, and then there's a deceleration. There is an emotive change. I mean, even when you're traveling in the car, there is a difference when you travel at 180 kilometers an hour and you know you're traveling, and you're traveling at 60 kilometers an hour. And there is an emotional response to it. To me, the aesthetics was definitely beyond just giving you some discourse on something. Because the way they have handled the idea of raga, the way they have embedded within it phraseology, the way they have used text to actually highlight phraseology, placing the text syllables in those positions that will give you movements. I think if you really study their sahitya, their compositions, you actually see that these people were, I like to call them art musicians. And I think it is from them that we have learned most of what I said today, is looking at their compositions, analyzing the movement, trying to see if there is similarity in the way they've used similar movements and similar phraseology in different ragas, whether the text positions are different. If so, what does it do to that whole melodic movement? I think it's phenomenal. I think it's everything that we do today is on the basis of what they have actually given us beautifully. Pretty much.
Professor Trimble has talked about emotional crying as part of tragedies, Western classical tragedies. Can you think of a Carnatic music equivalent?
I think the Greek idea of tragedies is very different from the Indian idea of theatre. I can't say Carnatic music, but if you look at if you're going to look at Kalidasa, or if you're going to look at theatre in the Indian context, I think if if you even look at the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, I think the idea of characters was very different. The idea of the hero was very different. The idea of how the hero is layered as a human being is very different from Greek tragedies. I think Greek tragedies had a very different idea of how they placed character to people, and therefore the tragedy itself was embedded in the placement of two, let's just say two poles, and the battle of the poles, what actually happened. Most of tragedies work that way. So I really don't think so. But I really think that the idea of crying, or let's not even say the act of crying, let's say the feeling of crying, if I was going to say that. You may not actually have tears, but you may have the exactly same feeling as you would have just before the first tear came out. Not when the tear comes out, but just before the tear comes out. I think that essential quality, which is an experience of aesthetics, to me is experience of art, is there across board. It's a question of how the receiver is actually engaging with that art, with that aesthetic, to be able to have that experience. To us, it happens sometimes very, for example, I've again used this before, we just taking a hike, okay? And then you're just turning a corner on a mountain, and you suddenly see something. It could be a sunrise, it could be anything. Just before you recognize that it's a sunrise, there's something that happens to your gut. Okay? Now, what is that? Is that sad? Is that happy? Is that ecstasy? You actually don't have a word for it. Right? And that is very close to that whole feeling of gut when you listen to great music, when you see a beautiful piece of artwork. There is that feeling. So I think the feeling of crying in terms of a larger idea, rather than an idea of sadness, exists, I think, in all pure art everywhere around the world.
Even among musicians, as a kind of fairly illiterate rasika, I can see some people who are technically extremely sound, but perhaps not very melodic. And we also listen to people who are extremely melodic, but perhaps not as technically in depth. How do you see these differences, and why do they exist?
I think I said that in a single word, tried to say, I think the whole idea of technique in art is not about skill. Technique is about emotion. If you're not going to have the idea that emotion is the basis of art, then there's no use for technique. There's actually no use. So art is about, technique is actually a way of abstracting emotion for everybody. So if technique ceases to be that, then it ceases to be art. So there is no point in being technically skilled, but artistically void. There is no point. In fact, technique does not exist in art if it is not artistically fulfilling, emotionally grasping. I don't think it exists.
I know that you have completed a book on this subject. Could you give us a little preview?
Yeah, this is one of the subjects in the book. It's a book that I've written over the last couple of years or more. One of the sections of the book which deals with the idea of music and aesthetics. And of course, aesthetics in far more detail in terms of Carnatic music, but it's a huge subject. It's a book of, it's a collection of essays that I've written. And one whole section deals with the idea of what is aesthetic construction within Carnatic music, and why it is constructed in a certain way. Can we see why we react to it in a certain way? If so, why? What is the context of its evolution? There's another whole segment which deals with the music's interaction with society, which is a very complex interaction. Whether it's an interaction regarding religion, regarding caste, regarding gender, regarding language. It deals with all these issues, technology. All these are issues that art has dealt with. And another full section which is on the history of the music, where I've tried to trace why we are where we are, and not where we came from, but where, let's say, from where we can see ourselves. That's about it.
Thank you. I'm sure we all look forward to that book.
Thank you very much.
We all love to listen to you sing. So could you please give us one full number to sign off?
Sing one. Is there a question? Any question?
Can we listen to him sing first? And I think questions can follow outside if you don't mind.
Is there a couple of questions? I'll take them and then sing. That's better. Because after singing, I don't like to talk.
two quick questions, then we'll permit.
Basic question for everyone, including Professor. When you refer all the time to the gut, you mean that the intestine, or what do you mean by that? One.
You're taking that question.
Two, there's a fight between Choklingam and Krishnamurti. I'm a cardiologist, he's a neurologist. Which is more stronger, more beneficial, more useful, or whatever thing? We always say, I am very great because heart specialist, he is great because a neurologist. But they don't say, hearty congratulations, hearty welcome, sweet thought. They won't say brainy congratulations, brainy welcome, sweet brain. There's one, but both are interlinked, they are going to work. Why you often refer to the gut? Is it going to become a gastroenterologist, or are you going to bring in?
Since I
One.
see, yeah.
Another thing is, music has got no language. You mean if you don't add any lyric into that, there's no language in that? What do you want to say? Music
People
has
say a
got-
lot of things. That's one of the things, that music has no language. I think that's, I don't know why they say. They probably say it because it touches you directly, emotionally, and you don't need to linguistically understand it. And maybe that's why they used that phrase for a long time. And when I said gut, I'll tell you how I was using it, or what I took from what he said. I can't speak for him. I can only speak experientially. It's because experientially, as a person who's not a performer or not a musician, as a person who's engaged in art, I see that whenever I have a special moment in art, a moment that may make me cry, okay, or get me close to that. It's not a sad moment. It's not a moment that I feel like I lost somebody. Something happens to my stomach. Something happens to this part of my body. No other part of my body. Sorry, sir, not the heart. Not the heart. And not the brain. It is here. It is here that, when you say you have a lump in your throat, actually you're saying that something from here is coming to your throat. It's not from your head to your throat. Your lump in your throat actually comes from your stomach. If you actually look at it, when you say lump in your throat, it actually goes from here and just holds you. So when I say gut, I don't care about the physiology of it. I am not a doctor. Okay? I care about how I experience it. And my job is to talk about experience. And in my experience, my very limited experience of art, with no experience in terms of being a doctor, it is here. It's all from here. Thank you very much.
There is a phrase that is often heard, which is told to learners or aspiring musicians, saying, Tamil,
என்னதுல?
or it should be in the blood if you want to be a musician. Do you think that music is inherited, or there's some genetic link to music?
Honestly, I think it's very, it's like saying intelligence isn't genetics. Now, I always have a problem with these generalizations because we first don't know how to define intelligence. Now, these are such abstract ideas. Intelligence, music are very abstract ideas. Can we really look for genetic sources for it? I put it this way. For the sanity of society, it is better that we do not look for that answer. Because I think as society, we have discriminated against people enough based on trying to find an answer to that question. It's probably far better for us not to look for this genetic connection for intelligence, for art, or anything else, because we are already so messed up. So let's just be a little careful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, speaker has made unwarranted distinction of art music and religious music. In the state of Karnataka, non-Hindus are also practicing Carnatic music, and only classical music shows the highest form of emotion. There is no word in English, that's bhakti. Only classical music can show that emotion, bhakti. And
Are you telling me all this, or are you asking me a question?
No, but you made it. You have taken the lecture in this separate way. These were not included. And you are saying that only
That's because, sir, I don't intend to include it, sir.
But you made that only classical music has an effect of lingering on. A non-classical music won't do that. When a person has taken alcohol, he cannot then he can enjoy classical music. Sorry? Classical music. When a person has taken alcohol or drugs, he cannot enjoy classical music. There are some distinctions. And in a way, you cover up everything you said, sir. You are saying that music is, every music is okay. But classical music has a separate distinction. Thank you.
Well, I thank you for your contribution, but I disagree with you and I'm going to sing. Just one song to wrap up.
పూరిని స్థిరముగా నెల కొన్నసాగిగా ధర్మపూరిని స్థిరముగా నెల కొన్నసాగిగా ధర్మమూల నేను కోరని పురోగెరా ధర్మమూల నేను కోరని పురోగెరా ధర్మమూల నేను కోరని పురోగెరా పరురన్నమాట నమ్మవదు ప్రాణనాయక పరులన్నమాట నమ్మవదు ప్రణనాయక పరులన మాట నమ్మవదు ప్రణనాయక
When I think of Krishna's boldness and how he's innovating and making us think and respond, Robert Frost comes to mind. The woods are dark, lonely and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. I'm sure that we will see more and more of Krishna. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him a big hand. So Krishna, what you need to keep challenging us is good health. And so we have for you a small tanjore of Dhanvantri, which we'd like you to carry home as a health guru.
We request you to please be seated. We would like to take this opportunity to greet our faculty of this evening, both national and international, with a small memento. A brass statue of Lord Nataraja, the epitome of Indian dance and music. We would like to request Mrs. Uma Kartik Narayanan to please do the honors, ma'am. Professor Michael Trimble, do you please accept? Professor Nigel Osborne. Sri T.M. Krishna. We would like to request our Tambura artist for the evening, Ms. Vidya, to please accept a small memento from us. Thank you, ma'am. We invite Dr. E.S. Krishnamurthy to propose the vote of thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you will agree with me that today would not have been possible without the two main players, Professor Michael Trimble and Sri T.M. Krishna. Please give them both a big hand. I think today also would not have been possible but for the Chatna Trust, the Gopal Krishna family, Sri C.V. Kartik Narayanan, Gayatri, Ms. Uma Narayan, the whole family. And we'd like to give them a very big hand. Thank you for permitting us to impose ourselves on them year after year. Thank you so much. I think We'd like to thank the faculty from abroad who have come to the conference a very long way, many of the delegates who have come from other parts of India. And I thank all of you for having taken the time to be here and to enrich the evening with us. I'd like to thank the press that's covered the evening very well. I'd like to thank the hotel for its hospitality and looking after us well. I believe we all ate well. I'd like to thank Maradeshwar Enterprises, the organizing secretariat, for doing a good job as always, in absence of Lalita to beat them up. And I'd like to thank also Vision Hire, Good Impressions, all those people who help us put this all together. And I think our team from Christian Primate and from VHS, all of whom have turned up, worked hard today and will work hard tomorrow as well. So thank you to everyone. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.